Welcome, everybody, to the Building the Local Donut Economy workshop. My name is Heather Bates, and I'm one of the organizers of Forward Nanaimo 22, which is an online conference focused on key issues facing the city of Nanaimo and the central Vancouver Island region. The first workshop looked at local food systems. The second one last week was about housing. Tonight, we're talking about building our local donut economy, and next week, we'll focus on climate action and care for the environment. We hope the series will help to build foundational knowledge on local issues and become a driver of positive action amongst candidates in the upcoming 2022 local government elections. I'd like to acknowledge that the Regional District of Nanaimo is situated on the traditional territories of the Nanaimo, the Snanoas, Stuminas, Qualicum, Cheseth, and Comox First Nations. We recognize the historical and ongoing injustices that are perpetuated by the colonial system against the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. We understand that living and working on these lands means that we have a responsibility not only to strive for meaningful nation-to-nation relationships between our colonial governments and First Nations, but also to care for and protect the land, water, and air that we all rely on. This evening, we are pleased to have three expert panelists, Ben Gesselbracht, Kim Smythe, and Tyler Brown, who will discuss the global concept of the donut economic model developed by Kate Raworth in the local context of Nanaimo. We'll have some time for questions and we'll split off into breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together as a large group to wrap up. So please feel free to put questions and comments into the chat as we go. And we are recording the session, so we will be making the recording publicly available afterwards, so the great ideas shared can reach as many people as possible. And we may also use some of the input provided by everyone here tonight in future communications with election candidates or elected officials, although we won't attribute any statements to any person by name unless we ask for your permission first. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Ben for the first presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Good evening, everyone. Great to see all your faces. And yeah, my name is Ben Gesselbracht. I'm a councillor at the City of Nanaimo. And we're presenting with Tyler Brown, councillor from the City of Nanaimo, and Kim Smythe, our CAO of the Chamber of Commerce. And we'll be speaking about building the donut economy locally. So with the donut economy, it's term that's been used more and more within our city, and it's part of our official community plan as a guiding vision and framework. And in this presentation, I'll start off sort of at the 50,000-foot view, explaining a bit the concept at the sort of a national global level and its broad purposes. And then we'll slowly funnel down to the brass tacks of what it actually means being implemented here in Nanaimo, sort of with policy and action, and then out in the community. Also like to mention too, Kim Smythe was the chair of a working group with the Mayor's Task Force on building the donut economy awareness within the community, and he'll speak more to that. It comes to him. So I'll start off here with the broad picture of what the donut economy is. So basically, the donut economy is a concept that was developed by Kate Raworth, and the purpose, she's an economist in London, and the purpose was really to develop an understanding of and a way to measure what is a successful economy. When we say our economy and how goods and services and how we utilize resources and distribute within our communities and build our communities, and how do we know if our economy is being successful? There's been a lot of criticism, where we're measuring our economy and it's growing, with GDP each year, 5%, 6%, 7% is really charging for it. It goes down to 3%. But at the same time, we can be eroding, very key aspects of our environment, or we can be having social problems be arising, and it's not captured in these measurements. So Kate set out to figure out how can we measure this in a way that's more meaningful for the challenges we face today? And it's like today we live in an era where Amazon, the company, can have an evaluation of over trillions of dollars, and yet the Amazon rainforest is worthless until it's cut down and burnt. Doesn't show up in a balance sheet until there's soybean crops in it. And so there's some fundamental issues with how we're assigning value. So I'm going to share a screen here and with a few slides. Okay, so here is the doughnut economy model, and it's based on two fundamental concepts: that there is a ecological ceiling, which has planetary boundaries for the planet. And when you cross these things, what happens is that the environmental ecological systems are eroded and they threaten basic life-sustaining systems and the foundation of what our economy is built upon. So these things there's limits in terms of carbon emissions in our atmosphere. There's limits on the amount of ocean acidification, the amount of chemical pollution, how much fresh water can be utilized and taken out, how much land can be converted to forest and to cropland or development, the amount of biodiversity that's lost. And so any healthy economy has to operate within the planetary boundary. On the other end, on the inside of the donut, is the social foundation. And so in order to maintain social order, to be able to have a productive society that can work well with one another and produce goods and services, and that can thrive, basic social needs must be met around access to food, healthcare, education, peace, justice, safety, social equity, gender equality, housing, and access to energy. And when those needs aren't being met, there is a deficit, and a society suffers and erodes. And so a healthy economy is one that can keep everyone above those social foundations. And so if we evaluate as a globe, we're falling behind in the ecological ceiling. We're crossing boundaries around climate change, the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in our oceans, the amount of land that's been converted, the amount of biodiversity lost. And then we're not meeting key social foundations as a globe, around social equity, housing, water, access to food. So each country is a little bit different. You can see Canada here on the right. As a nation, we exceed way more in the environmental, using way more resources than in our fair share, crossing boundaries and carbon emissions, phosphorus loading, land conversion, and the amount of materials that we're using. And our social foundations, for the most part, are being met, although, within even Nanaimo, we can see areas where we're not meeting, and there are definite pockets where housing, education, those elements aren't being met in communities. Countries traditionally, called in the third world, some are operating well within their ecological boundary, but not meeting key social foundations. So in the city of Nanaimo, an example, we're exceeding our carbon emissions. We set goals in 2010 to be below, 30% below our target by 2020. And in 2020, we actually exceeded it by 17%. We also, the issue around homelessness and addictions in our community. There's 6,000 people in our community that are at risk of housing instability. So we're not meeting some key social foundations as well. So our council's adopted the doughnut economy. So trying to get our economy working in that sweet spot between our social, our ecological limits within them, and above our social foundation. So meeting the needs of people within the means of the planet. So we asked the question that we asked in our community is, how can Nanaimo be home to a thriving people and a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? And so we asked this, what we can do here within our boundaries in Nanaimo, both for our environment and for people, but also taking responsibility of our impact on environments outside of our borders. For example, there's no borders when it comes to carbon emissions, nor, the impacts of, what materials are we using? Are they impacting folks' labor or well-being outside of our borders as well? So we've joined quite a lot of other countries that have committed to the donut model and operating within the sweet spot of the donut all across the world. And it's been really cool connecting with people. I've been on calls with folks in Israel, Brussels, Amsterdam, down in South Africa. There's places in South America, throughout North America. Toronto's looking at the donut model, Portland, Philadelphia. And there's a growing international community that's really trying to align to this big picture vision and then bring it down to what it means in the local community. So here in Nanaimo, we've adopted as part of our Reimagine process. And we've created 5 goals that represent the green Nanaimo represents what it looks like for Nanaimo to operate within its ecological limits. And then a healthy Nanaimo around community well-being and livability, equitable access to mobility, diversity, culture, and social integration, and economic prosperity to capture what it means for Nanaimo to operate within its, to provide for its social foundation. So we had a big workshop, with the different committees that Nanaimo, the Environment Committee, the Social Inclusion Committee, then members that were part of the Economic Development Task Force, along with the Home Health and Housing, and workshopped a bunch of targets and indicators, because a key component of the donut model that's been downscaled to the scale of Nanaimo is that we've got goals and targets that are measurable, so that we know whether we're succeeding or not in what policies and actions we're choosing. And so there's an adage, what gets measured gets managed. And so it's really important that we've got these very clear goals and targets so that we can track our progress. And so within those 5 categories, we've developed a series of indicators and targets, and they're a work in progress, but with the environment, there's a series that around, carbon emissions, around the amount of environmentally sensitive land protected, around the amount of waste that we're producing, setting a, zero waste target. And then also within the social foundation, we've got goals and targets around, targets around, reducing homelessness, the affordability of rent, our vacancy rate, things in mobility around how close people's access to daily needs are, the amount of distance people need to drive, mode shifts in transportation, things within, we're working on a metric on inclusion and diversity, and another one sort of for an example, and for economic prosperity would be ample and diverse business opportunities, looking at the different types and numbers of businesses and the diversity, and trying to build a diverse spectrum of opportunity. And there's many more that you can look into in more depth. What's critical within, when you're applying donut economics to the scale of a city or even to the scale of an organization, there's 7 different ways of thinking. And one of the most important that a lot of the work that we focused on is changing the goal. So instead of the old goal that looking at for growth and for your community to be successful, is really making that vision a little bit more holistic. And there's been development of these well-being indexes other communities have done, but really listing out a broad spectrum of goals that you can measure for what it looks like for a community to be successful, and really being clear on what those goals are, and continually measuring yourself against them. So that's really shifting the ways. Another aspect is whenever we're looking at implementing programs, different initiatives, asking the question, is our impact, is it regenerative to the environment? Are we, by our actions, improving our natural environment around us, both within our borders and outside? And another critical one is how we're designing our systems, is it distributive? Are we distributing the wealth in our community, or are we concentrating it in the hands of a few? And this question around equity is a really important one. And I saw a shocking stat actually in the last workshop, is that in Nanaimo, we actually have double the amount of people that make over $100,000 in our community compared to other BC communities. And at the same time, we have, I think, double the per capita homelessness compared to any other community. And that's actually quite a striking indication of inequality. How can we become a more wealthier community, and one that wealth is distributed? And so designing to redistribute, one example is, hey, our procurement initiatives, we should be buying local so that we're providing opportunity for local businesses in this region. And Tyler will speak more to that. But those key thing of building a redistributive and regenerative systems. And so the last slide that I'm going to show is just things that we can look at within our city for different areas of policy. Is one, making sure that our purpose at every level, at the larger vision of the city, right down to in each department is very clear, and that our purpose is aligned with that donut vision of building, meeting the needs of people within the means of the planet. And then looking at our different networks, who are the organizations that we're working closely with and in relationship with, and are we promoting this vision with them, and how do we support each other in working towards those same goals? Looking at our governance structures, making sure that there's a diversity of people sitting at the table, decision-making tables. And then looking, what we're investing in terms of our utilities, public infrastructure, how we're doing our annual budgeting, our procurement, and Tyler is going to speak more exactly about specific policies that we can do to really downscale that broad vision of the donut to the scale of the city. So I'll hand it over to Tyler now and to speak more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So first of all, I want to apologize to everyone. My webcam stopped working, so I've got it hooked up to my iPad, which is below me, and everybody else is above on the screen. So it's creating a weird thing of where do I look? So I apologize. Ben, if you could just go to the next slide. I'm going to try to quickly cover what is a very, very big topic, and sort of where we're at with the integration of the donut, and where I think, I should give a little of disclosure here, where I think we should go in the next 1 to 3 years, and as we start to incorporate it. And I think there's lots of other ideas out there that could be incorporated, but I'm going to touch upon a couple that I think are highly important. So Reimagine Nanaimo essentially is the official community plan review with some additional documents supporting it. It's aiming to capture different items in one comprehensive city plan. A traditional official community plan touches on land use planning. The context of our city is very challenging. It's long, linear, autocentric. It's been traditionally so, and there's still a lot of land use policies that support that. As the slide highlights here, that there's sort of the current trajectory we're on, and it developed a couple scenarios around how we could better manage our land use in the decades to come to start to meet some of those goals that are articulated in the donut. There was 2 options, number 2 and 3. I think where we're going is probably a hybrid of those 2, one that incorporates some existing sort of hubs that that we know exist, and sort of our transit network to some degree follows those, and then a more central focus of sort of the higher urbanized area of downtown, the university, and sort of the hospital area, and that triangle that connects them all, having a lot of potential to see some growth and create more compact, walkable communities. Ben, next slide, please. yeah, so there's different scenarios with those land use. This is just a graphic that attempts to show that with all things there's trade-offs. Some scenarios in land use growth patterns will result in lower GHG emissions, while they may be other scenarios will score higher in housing affordability. So like all things, there's a trade-off, and we have to manage that trade-off to try to find the best possible path forward. Next slide, please, Ben. Okay, so at this point, I think I'll just ask you to end the slide, because I'm gonna cover two things. Example of current donut informed city policies and initiatives. I'm gonna cover that actually second, because I just want to touch upon first where I think we have the potential to go with some of our city initiatives. And just due to time wise, I'm gonna highlight a few things that I think we can build upon to get there. And so at the end of the day, I think, a lot of people get hung up on the word economics. And then there's this question of, oh, what is the economics? What is the economic model? And what I'd like to sort of posit or put forward is that we should really just be looking at this as a lens or framework in which we're going to analyze our actions and try to downscale that to the city level. And the downscaling, which Ben touched upon, is essentially where the rubber hits the road for us. Other governments have other things in their jurisdiction or in their domain, and the donut is going to look different at a provincial, federal level and a global level. And so if we contextualize it in the donut, the social goals that Ben touched upon are essentially globally adopted through the United Nations UN's the Sustainable Development Goals. And the outer limit is science-based, it's evidence-based, and it's based on research. And so as we downscale it, I think the fundamental question is, how do we adopt that lens as a culture? And I'm going to speak to this. I think we could speak to this as a community, and Kim's going to touch upon that a bit. He's done a lot of wonderful work, actually, some great suggestions that I'm really excited to see materialize, but I'm going to focus on the city. How do we bring this? How do we downscale this? Is going to be 100% dependent on the culture of City Hall and how it influences our projects, our activities, and as we move forward. And I think the natural place to do this, it might be a little bit of a boring place to do this, but every year the city has to adopt an annual budget. And this is legislated, and they have to also adopt a 5-year financial plan. Traditional budgeting, it's not too exciting. People focus on, the budget increase, their tax bill increase, and I get that. I take a look as myself as well. But the budget essentially contains all the projects and the operations that the city is doing, capital and operations. And I think there's a real opportunity here because, we are legislated to do this. We have to follow generally accepted accounting principles. We have a great accounting team to make sure that we do, and that we can't run deficits. Because we can tax property, because we can't run deficits, and because we have strong accounting values, we actually have, through the Municipal Financial Authority, the best bond rating out there. And so that gives us a lot of tools and a lot of borrowing capacity to do some interesting stuff. And then there's taxation and other forms of income. And so all that comes together to produce the projects in the annual operating goals of the city. Now, traditionally, we sort of build the budgets based on the flavor of the day, and where we're thinking we're going, strategic plans, projects that are in the queue. Now, to Baltimore a few years ago emerged this really interesting process for it's been termed outcome-based budgeting. And what they did is they said, well, what are we actually trying to achieve? And what is the goals and the values that we want to see realized over 1, 5, 10 years? And then they would completely rebuild the budget to meet those goals, rather than sort of taking last year's budget and merging it with sort of where, the projects that are in the hopper sort of thing. And what they found by doing that is they would, they could measure it, as Ben talked about, the performance indicators, what gets managed or what gets measured gets managed. And then they could draw direct connections to realizing projects to their budget and finding a lot of efficiencies and effectiveness. I think if we adopted that at the city level, taking the outcomes that we want to see, those values articulated in the donut, and that is valued through the Reimagine Nanaimo, and work backwards on an annual basis for our budget in our 5-year planning, our financial plan, we would really start to see the embedding of donut thinking as we move forward in every department. And I think parallel to that is we need to restructure the traditional staffing hierarchy of the city. This has been done in Amsterdam, or is being done. It's taking longer than they anticipated. So, there's probably a lot that we can learn from as they've moved forward from taking the traditional city hierarchy of departments and divisions and start in repurposing that to better align with one, again, the articulated values in the donut, but also realizing the interconnectedness and the interdependence of a lot of these different departments when you focus on a project. So for example, we don't do transit because we have a transit department. We do it because there's things that we are trying to achieve. And transit as a delivery meets different goals. It lowers our carbon emissions through transportation options. It provides an option that is more affordable for people to get to work, things that they want to do, provides mobility options for those that are unable to drive due to ages and abilities. And I think we often lose sight of that when it's the transit department, it's the transit plan. Well, no, it touches upon a lot of things, and there's a lot of interconnectedness there between the public works department, where and how it builds sidewalks, transit stops, and land use planning, that interconnectedness. So I think there's a real option, and I think Amsterdam is on the right path of looking at that and embedding that thinking actually in the structure. We build things to serve a goal. We don't create goals to serve a structure. And so, we need to convert the structure and change the structure to help us achieve what we're trying to do. And I hope a new city council will at least look at that and begin to retool that, and also look at the outcome-based budgeting, because I think the two things, if they came together within a 1 to 3 year horizon, would really embed the donut thinking and the donut lens into the culture of City Hall, into the culture of the bureaucracy, and would put us on a path to better meet a lot of the goals that Ben talked about in a much faster and more efficient and effective way. Secondly, I don't think we can do this in isolation. I think this needs to happen at the regional district in Nanaimo as well. Just quickly for you, the regional district essentially spans from South Wellington Cedar area to the Bowser area to the Coombs Arrington Hilliers area. It's comprised of electoral areas in different municipalities, but essentially we all work together in a lot of ways to overcome these goals. And use the example of agriculture. Most of our agriculture production, if it is going to be local, will happen in the regional district. There's ways that we can bring those two together to better meet some of these goals, but we need to have aligned frameworks and aligned values and aligned goals. They don't need to be completely aligned, but they need to be pointed in the same direction, which they are in a lot of ways, but they're sort of lacking that unifying framework. The financial context is slightly different at the regional district, but more or less it is the same. So quickly, I want to be cognizant of time and make sure we get lots of time for questions and lots of time for Kim. What do we build on to get there? There's lots of good things happening. Then there's lots of areas that need improvement. I think often we focus on a lot of the negative things, and that's okay as long as we're doing so with an eye to how to fix them. But there is I think if we're going to start to build new things, we have to go where the energy is, and we have to go where we're finding successes. So this is opportunity for success. So agriculture, I think, is one that we could touch on, and it was a great session. I hope people saw previously for Nanaimo, there was three panelists and great discussion around agriculture. Lots of good stuff. I highly recommend watching that to see what we might build on. I think there's a huge opportunity between the city and the regional district of Nanaimo around our solid waste diversion goals at 90%. That to meet that demands a move to circularity and being more conscious with the waste that we generate and what we do with it. So it's looking at our waste stream fundamentally differently and saying that is not the end of life when we landfill. No, we take it from the landfill and we would find a way to repurpose it, remanufacture, and get back into the manufacturing stream. Lots of good work being done there. That's a whole nother session. But there's a real opportunity there to work with private industry, because it's dependent on private industry to meet those goals. Mr. Smythe is going to cover on, I think, some really neat stuff. But at the city level, We adopted sustainable procurement framework, sometimes called social procurement as well. A little bit different, but they're more or less the same thing. This is really being conscious of the things that we purchase as a city, the RFPs that we put out, contracts from services to materials to goods, and making sure that they're working towards our goals. It rewards contracts that help us meet our goals rather than always just seeking the lowest dollar. It weights things like whatever gets put in there, but it weights things like materials that may have a lower carbon footprint. It weights things such as maybe more indigenous employment or more equitable employment, things like that. So it's taking those donut principles and building them into the contracts that we're doing. I highlight this because to me, this is the same type of thinking that we need now to start to expand out beyond just our purchasing department and building into the business plans of every city department. So when we're developing business plans, what is the lens that we're looking through? And and ultimately, I think that would translate into every single staff report, like the city of Cornwall comes forward with a donut decision-making lens that shows, hey, these are the values that we hit. Hey, these are the ones that we might be compromising on this. So the decision is made, again, understanding that interdependentness and the interconnectedness of all decisions. Those two I just wanted to highlight. There's a lot more that we could cover, but cognizant of time. And again, I think there's a lot of value that will come out of the questions. I'll go to turn it over to Mr. Spine.
Thank you, Tyler. And with that, I am about to demonstrate how those were two of the smarter people in the room than me on donut economics. When this was first introduced at council, I thought, well, that's a charming thought and an interesting notion. I did do a little bit of research into it, and then I was invited to join something called the Mayor's Leaders Table, and specifically to lead some discussion around infrastructure asks for our community. Another topic was youth retention, and a third topic was the donut economy. We had an introductory meeting, and then we were asked to choose a breakout room to go into, and I pondered for a few seconds before saying, well, donut economy sounds like an interesting conversation. Let's go there. I checked into the room, and the first thing that the moderator staff from City said was, now we have to choose a chair. And for some reason, everybody in the Zoom room turned to me and said, this guy'd make a great chair. I know nothing about the donut economy, but here's a great opportunity to learn from my friends and colleagues who probably know about the same amount. So it's been an interesting voyage, learning together and determining how we might be able to really integrate donut economic philosophy into Nanaimo's future. It doesn't take a lot to understand that obviously, if we don't think in this way, if we don't take this circular economy concept and put it on steroids, we're going to be in big trouble sooner than later. So we started to have very interesting conversations at that committee level about what that meant to the municipality, what that meant to our individual organizations and businesses, because everybody in this Zoom conversation we're having is the leader of their own organization, whether it's a for-profit, nonprofit, social enterprise, or other kind of organization. And we became very aware that the subject was deeper than anything that we could contribute to it. So one of the first things that I did was ask the city to provide us with Kate's book on the donut economy model and have us all read that before we even started in on having a conversation. So we wanted to reach out, grab these concepts, see how they work on a global basis, and then come back together again and see how we could make that make sense on a local and a community basis. We then also had to realize that our assignment wasn't to create the donut economy in Nanaimo, but our assignment was to create awareness around the donut economy, at the economic philosophy, and how that model could apply on a municipal level as well as on a global level, and then how the two could work back and forth. So it was been very interesting and insightful several months of conversation about this. And we've come up with some recommendations, which I'd like to share with you. I'd really like to sort of salute the city and the work done in Reimagine Nanaimo. I hope that most of you have seen, at least online, the city plan book that's come out and the way it has integrated all of the future plans for the city in the layers of the donut economy. So it really drives home how every component of our life in our community is impacted by economic thinking, and how we can change that economic thinking by being aware ourselves of the donut economy, the impact of the donut economy, and how we can bring it right down to our own lives, not just our businesses and our organization, but down to our own lives and our own way of thinking. So the One Framework, 5 City Goals document, I thought was the absolutely most significant thing that could happen to turn our thinking around going forward. And Ben pointed it out earlier and showed you the graphic, and I'm not going to, but I just want to talk about, the 5 layers there and the 5 city goals. A green Nanaimo, resilient and regenerative ecosystems. A connected Nanaimo, equitable access and mobility. A healthy Nanaimo, community well-being and livability. And although I'm the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, I never try to fool anybody that if we don't have a healthy community, we will never, ever have a healthy economy. Point number 4, an empowered Nanaimo, reconciliation, representation, and inclusion. 3 very important equal factors in success going forward. And I think some of you witnessed our memorandum of agreement that we signed with Nanaimo First Nations about 10 days ago, that really signals a commitment for the Chamber of Commerce, certainly, but hopefully by extension, the business community of Nanaimo to commit to UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and especially where it impacts indigenomics and the growth of the Indigenous economy. And finally, a prosperous Nanaimo. I'm the Chamber of Commerce guy, right? So talking about a thriving and resilient economy, and not a thriving and resilient economy for the next 4 years, 10 years, the extent of our generation, but certainly well into the future. So again, hats off to everybody at the city, as well as everybody in the community. Thousands of people provided input into Reimagine Nanaimo, and these are some of the outputs from that community feedback. So give me a pause here. I'd like to talk about our recommendations around donut economic philosophy awareness. Number 1 was to develop an awareness program for city staff and council to embed the concept through the organization and include training and council orientation for 2022-23 as we're entering a new 4-year term of governance coming this fall. Recommendation number 2. To develop an awareness program for city entities, the new Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, the new Tourism Nanaimo, and the new Systems Planning Organization, and to also engage with nonprofit groups that are significantly influenced, funded, or directed by the city, and that would be the Port Theatre, the museum, and other key stakeholders. So don't forget, the city funds and supports a large number of external agencies and nonprofits. And so every one of those funding opportunities is also an opportunity to engage in conversation and engage in influencing thinking towards the donut economics philosophy. Our recommendation number 3 is to establish a donut economics coalition with the wider Nanaimo community to support and promote the philosophy. Again, that's reaching out into the community to engage, to provide direction, to invite participation in turning the corner towards the donut economy. Recommendation number 4 is to develop a donut economics business and nonprofit recognition program. So acknowledge people who are participating in activities that lean towards a donut economy and lean towards a healthier and more prosperous future, obviously. Recommendation number 5 is to create a donut-focused, outcome-based budgeting process for 2023. Tyler brought this up, and it might be a bit aggressive to think that we can pull this off for the next budget year, but to start to move towards all of this thinking. And I'm even more encouraged hearing what Tyler just had to say about the work that's being done behind the scenes right now and how that can be really influenced and implemented coming soon. Hopefully 2023 would be great. Recommendation number 6, advocate for alignment of donut economy principles across the region. We are obviously the economic leader in the Mid-Island, and it would be only reasonable to expect to have conversation with other municipal leaders, other community leaders, and the regional district to try to start to filter this down to others who are around us and form our greater economy. With a population somewhere approaching 160,000 people in the Mid-Island, 105 or 106,000 ourselves out of StatsCan this week, having that influence across the region so it feeds back in to where we're going as the center of that Mid-Island economy. So that's what I have to share, and I think I've delivered on convincing you that the other two gentlemen in this discussion are much more well versed in the details around donut economy, and I look forward to our small roundtable discussions now to gather questions and ideas and the input of the group gathered here. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, Kim. Thank you so much for that. I need to remind everybody how lucky we are to have a CEO of the Chamber of Commerce who's been sitting on the development of our systems planning organization, the Health and Housing Task Force, that's been helping develop our economic development organization, and the chair of the Donut Economy Awareness Task Force on the mayor's leadership table, and been providing awesome leadership. So that was a great presentation and very succinct, bringing it to in real terms. So thank you. So we're going to now go and take some questions from folks. There's been a few posted in the chat that we'll address, and then we'll take more from the floor. There was one posted that are the goals and targets developed through the Donut Economics Framework publicly available? And so thanks for that question. So those goals that I posted up there, they were in, we developed them like almost a year ago now. And Tyler showed that slide that where our different land use scenarios were being evaluated. They use those targets as models to evaluate which land use scenarios perform the best within that donut framework. And they exist in some staff presentation slides that were available on the Governance and Priorities Committee. I was frantically searching while folks were speaking here to find it, and I can't find them. So what I'll try to do is post the slides that I have of those goals, which are still in a draft form. I'll try to post them in a Google link and have them shared, but they go into detail, sort of what are the targets and indicators we're searching for. And then those targets and indicators are the outcomes that we're striving for within our official community plan policy document are written in each section of the draft OCP. What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve that will then, we'll measure our success on them based on those indicators. And so there's a few pieces that fit together. There's another question from Heather to Tyler. What would it take to change the organization of the city departments as you suggested? So Tyler, you can go ahead and have the first crack at that.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really good question. So the model most I think every municipality uses in British Columbia is it's called the one employee model, and essentially is you have your CAO, and the CAO is in charge with operations. So and structuring the organization, and this is done, I think, a trial and error over a long time as being the most effective model of separating governance from operations and making sure information flows appropriately both ways. I think there's restructures happen all the time, and I think there's a conversation that could be had at some point that makes sense between council, whoever the CAO is, and it's occupying that seat around how do we start to move towards a structure that in my mind breaks down silos a little bit and match it. Ben showed up that example of the different ways of thinking, and I think a lot of those traditional ways of thinking are embedded in the structures in which we operate, and there's a real conversation and a real analysis that the CAO and the senior team of the city could do to sort of move in the direction of new thinking and moving towards a more interconnected model rather than sort of the traditional hierarchy that we're used to, the different silos that we're used to. So I think that's where it would start would be a conversation between council and the CAO, what that might look like and how it would be
implemented. That's great, Tyler. And just to add on to that, the power of having a framework and a clear organization, vision and goals for the community. We set the doughnut framework as the guiding vision and planning tool, and it's with the reimagined process. All the different city departments have put all their different policies into one document, and we're already seeing this much greater degree of integration between the partners because they're having to talk with one another. And so it's a really breaking down of the different silos, and taking that the next step further is what Tyler's talking about, is looking at how you can reorganize to better reflect what the achievement of those goals. And there's an economist out there called Mariano Mazzucato, and she actually, to my excitement, was hired by the provincial government. But she talks about mission-focused government, one that sets goals and objectives and organizes its resources around meeting those. And I think that's what we're really trying to promote for our organization, for the city, is to become more mission-focused to achieve those social and environmental and economic goals that we do set around. So we've got a question here, and then I'll go to some hands being raised. I see Zenny's got her hand raised, but for Kim, has the chamber been encouraging business owners in the city to understand and adopt doughnut economics philosophies?
What we have been doing is sharing the information that's coming from the city on doughnut economics philosophy and how they are implementing it within the municipality. And we've been pretty bold in putting it out there as sort of a flag waving that we're going to be talking about this a whole lot more in the future, folks. Stay tuned. I'm looking forward to inviting speakers to our next or some available upcoming luncheons. Right now, we're booked out of luncheons through the balance of 2022. So going into 2023, when we have some available time to gather chamber members and the business community members around luncheons and other events, I anticipate that we will be inviting speakers to come and talk about taking this from a municipal government platform down to a business platform, and recognizing that 92% of the businesses in Nanaimo are small businesses, then how do we start to integrate this whole concept and philosophy within small businesses? So we're committed to doing the work on this, and it's been a sort of a slow boil, because I think that one of the best things that's been done, one of the best outputs through this whole thing has been, again, the integration of the donut concept into the whole city plan, and going through the 5 layers and looking how the donut applies to each of those layers, and then looking through the layers within the layers. So yes, is the short answer, and the long answer is we have much work to do, and we are excited to be doing it as the Chamber of Commerce. It's a new concept, and one that we are excited to be bringing forward and being bold about. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. And I think Kim's had us present at some point to the Chamber already, so appreciated. Zenny.
Hi, everyone. And thank you. I love talking about the donut economy. But I think one piece I just wanted to add a little bit, because I've been involved with social procurement initiative that I think ties right in with the donut economy. So not only are we trying to educate and give the tools to businesses or contractors or those who work with the city, that it's not always about who can give us something at the lowest cost. It's what values are you adding to it? How do you pay your employees? What benefits, etc. But besides that, I was just recently speaking about our investing, and it was last November where we approved an addition to our policy that included investing in socially responsible investment instruments. We did that last November. And so today I was being interviewed, and I was really pleasantly surprised when I was talking with our financial officer that as of December 31st, approximately 27% of the city's portfolio is in social responsible investments. And one of them that, of course, comes to mind right off the top was that we purchased the acreage. We kept the land, but Loaves and Fishes can build their warehouse, and that's an investment for the city. That I think of 5-acre farms, and we will look at other ways where we can maybe divert what we may know of investments that are in oil and gas and divert them where we're still fiscally responsible, but can find other ways. And that's being researched even by the province at this time too, of how we can have greener investments. So just wanted to add those 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Zenny. We've got another question. So do we know about the Circular Cities and Regions Initiative, CCRI, and how Nanaimo might be a part of it? So the concept of the circular economy is a real important strategy within building a donut economy, because it's taking responsibility for the materials that you use, and trying to build an economy where materials are kept in use, where waste and pollution is eliminated, and ecosystems are regenerative. And so the regional district in Nanaimo has been seen as a leader in this municipally, with setting a 90% waste reduction target. And so we were invited by the Circular Cities and Regions Initiative. So we are part of this group of cities across Canada working on developing circular economy strategies and sharing what's been working in our communities and how to improve our circular strategies here. And so the city of Nanaimo, we're working on building our own circular economy strategy. And we've had workshops as part of the Circular Cities Initiative setting. And I think we're setting goals and initiatives around circularizing, reducing waste in construction and demolition, because that's a huge amount of waste is still generated there. And then also looking at how we can incentivize businesses within our community to develop circular strategies within their business practices. So we've got another 5 minutes for questions. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add before we go into the breakout groups and have some discussion around this? I don't believe I'm seeing any other hands. So what we'll do is Heather is going to Tyler and Kim, did you have any other comments you'd like to share before we move into the breakout groups?
There's just one question that I quickly, I think you missed there from Francis. Thanks, Trent, for highlighting it. Question is, what are the best opportunities to reduce the city greenhouse gas emissions? Who has to be involved in making that happen? And how can we engage with the goal? Great question. Short on time, but the Reimagine Nanaimo process, there is some great graphs that show sort of the big contributions come from transportation, building stock, and existing building stock, and waste generation. That's the third category, right, Ben?
Yeah, minor waste, mostly buildings and transportation.
This is where I think there would be a little bit of a disagreement with different colleagues on council. I think the city has a fairly big role with respect to transportation, and also transportation through transit, cycling options, better pedestrian infrastructure, better land use decisions. And it's really in the domain of Nanaimo City Council. Transportation also is the big submitter. Who do we work for? Who do we work with? Undoubtedly the regional district, BC Transit, and to sort of combat those goals or combat those issues. With respect to building, again, that's going to come down to working with the development community, working with the province, and working with individuals. Low carbon heating solutions is by far where the biggest gains can happen. In my opinion, we should be limiting fossil fuel usage for new connections, keep them for just the type of uses that we really have no alternative for yet. But there's there'd be a really great opportunity for a program to focus on taking out oil as a primary heating source and replacing it with other low carbon energy solutions. We do have a lot of oil usage still in town. And so working with the province through rebate programs and private industry and private owners, there's big gains to be had there. Thanks. Great question though.
Thanks, Tyler. I'd been more blunt. If we don't deal with natural gas and what we're burning, that's why we've missed our last mission goals. We're not going to get anywhere. But
I've taken enough bullets the last few
years. Kim, did you have anything you'd like to add before we go into the breakout groups?
No, I'm going to leave it with Tyler's comments there. I got a good chuckle out of that one. So thank you, you two. Happy to go into discussion group.
Great. So Heather is going to split us up into discussion groups. There's 2 questions that we will be asking for discussion on. The first one is, the first question is, what actions aligned with donut principles could local businesses and community groups that you participate in take? And how could the city support this? And then 2, what goals or actions would you like the city to take to better realize the vision of a donut economy in Nanaimo? So we'll leave it to Heather, and we'll be beamed into other groups. And then if somebody would like to take notes, and we'll report back just some highlights of the discussion back to the larger group when we return here in 20 minutes.
So
Kim?
Ben, are the 3 of us moderators of each group? Is that the way the plan is? And then
each of us will be a moderator, and then probably we'll be the ones reporting back from the discussion. So that's our responsibility. So take some notes and moderate the discussion. Thanks.
Sounds good.
A Jamboard, which I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but it's a shared note-taking sort of platform. I will just very quickly show you how to add a sticky note onto the Jamboard. So everybody can click that link and it will take you right into this page here, or at the top, it'll say notes from breakout room 1, and you'll use that one if you find yourself in room 1. If you want to change to the notes page for room 2 or room 3, you just use these little arrows over here to scroll across to room 2 and room 3. And then if you want to put up a note in here, if you're the note taker or you just want to add your own note, you click this little square, which is the sticky note. And then you can type in my thoughts and ideas, whatever you have there, press save, and then you can move it around on the board to place it under the appropriate question. So feel free to use that if you'd like to, or one person can just take notes if that's preferred. So I will go ahead and launch the breakout rooms, and we'll see everybody back in 20 minutes.
Hey, Ben, I think your video's off.
My video's off?
Here we go. Here's your beautiful face.
Great. I think everybody's back. So yeah, we'll just go around before we end here, just hear from the facilitators, just sort of the flavor of the conversations that were going on. I can go first to break the ice here. Just, yeah, had a lovely conversation with everyone. And yeah, there was some great, we had some great conversation sort of about rewilding the streets and getting more trees. You know, I think we're fewer removed from commercial street, but brings in pollinators, and the research shows that it also brings in people to the businesses. And there was a great anecdote about, I think in Trail, someone shared that they passed an incentive for businesses to plant herbs and that outside their businesses, and people complained about it at the start and thing, but actually it made it you know, very attractive for people, and they could pick parsley or different thyme, you know, if they needed it right in front of the businesses. And that sounded kind of cool. There's some suggestions about community benefit bonds that get money for co-op and non-profit missing middle housing, and for the city to look at being able to lease land for co-op for housing as well, to build up that hot housing stock. Lots of interest in zero waste. We had Kelly from Vancouver Island Reusables, a really cool business to see thrive here. But just around, you know, the benefit when, you know, say the city of Victoria passed bans on disposable items, how big of an impact that does have in reducing waste, and, you know, around that, building that circular economy. And then also, you know, when you pass these regulations, it has the effect of spurring on businesses that fill in, you know, those niches. And you know, we've done one ban here so far, a plastic bag checkout ban, and it's been warm to see that happen. But there's still a lot more things that could be done. And then also, yeah, looking at the downtown zero waste shopping business experience, and just looking at other. And then there was some talk about just our forest lands here, just how we could reduce forest fires, and how forests now have become a net emitter in BC, which is somewhat frightening. And, you know, even simple things as having more broadleaf trees planted out in our forests. You know, we don't have direct jurisdiction over them, but there is some land in the regional district can really reduce the flammability of sort of more monocultures. So wonderful ideas, and I'll pass it on to Kim or Tyler here to sort of share some of the conversations they're having.
I'm happy to go next. Yeah, robust conversation, took off really quickly and was very active. Ian Gartshore was pointing to transportation issues and the way we make a way around town, I think, which needs to be rethought on a major basis. When we were in the midst of pandemic, we figured out how not to travel so much. Um, I never used so little gas in 2 years in my entire life as I have over the last 2 years. And maybe that's a lesson that we don't need to move around as much as we're coming back to, getting back together again and things like that. The recurring question that comes up at meetings is, oh, should we stop doing this on Zoom and get together? And my question always is, like, why do 10 of us have to drive 15 minutes to get to a meeting that we can then have to justify spending an hour together because it took us half an hour to get there and back? Why don't we stay home, save the gas, and have a productive meeting? Because we can via this, technology. Lynn Burrows brought up some very good points around uh, donut economics awareness, starting with young children in schools and growing food and vegetables and on their property and learning life skills that aren't of a digital variety, but of, sort of a push back in time to where we should be. Francis again brought up transportation, cars, and emissions. Um, Shelley was into third parties identifying themselves as participating in donut economics activities, rewarding. So her specific idea was around, deckling doors of businesses that pursue that, and then recognizing customers who acknowledge and who have maybe made a conscious choice to deal with that business because they are part of that forward-thinking economic philosophy. Also recognizing schools that lead, and then also bringing into, and something that I forgot and will be adding on to my recommendations, is that the school district, their physical plant and facilities really need to be addressed in terms of their acknowledgement of this whole concept. School curriculum, teaching about donut economic philosophy. Uh, she had a great rash of 4 or 5 ideas right there. Douglas, if it can't be measured, or if it's not measured, it can't be managed. And I think that either Tyler or Ben brought that up earlier, and so he reinforced that point. And how does the public understand how this all benefits them? So it's wonderful to be doing the right thing, but if I can't perceive that that's being done for my benefit, then where's my support? And where's my participation, more importantly? Zenny brought up the factor that we're seeing the donut economic philosophy appearing in our local business community through the growth of social enterprise, bringing up specifically Vancouver Island Crisis Care Society's opening of the Nanaimo Bakery and Cafe on Bowen Road, where they will be doing some on-the-job training for people to rehabilitate back into the workforce. And then also mention, one of our favorites, of course, Coco Cafe in Cedar, and how they are teaching folks from community learning or community living on getting into food preparation, food sourcing, the whole food chain delivery thing there. Shelley came back and talked about Indigenous business growth influencing this emerging economy of Indigenous entrepreneurialism and the organization of Indigenous businesses, small, medium, and large. And Zenny pointed to some sort of more major industries that were growing up around Nanaimo that were really forward thinking and part of a future economy. And I pointed to the soil remediation, soil and construction demolition remediation facility out in Duke Point that Councillor Bonner and Mayor Krogh recently visited. And then we topped that off with a couple of tips of the hat to Vancouver Island Reusable, which is the company that's trying to take out, that Kelly Etheridge is part of, trying to take out the non-reusable containers that we've seen so much of over the last 2 years of all of our takeout and delivery food services. And so I wanted to give a tip of the hat to Vancouver Island Reusable. I think they're an awesome organization. And last night, the Chamber introduced the fact that we are adopting a model called the Bread and Butter Collective, launched in Victoria. And Bread and Butter Collective is a restaurant association, and we will be focused on using Vancouver Island Reusables products.
Nice, good
Thank you.
stuff. Thank you, Kim. Tyler, then we've got to wrap her up here.
Yeah, I'll be real quick, just because we're over time. Well, started off with a bang. I think it's a good one, and it's always accountability. Maybe the city needs to lead by example. Some land use decisions don't align with, well, I think it will always be debatable, but I tend to agree that some of the land use decisions definitely don't align with donut economics, don't fit. So the example that was provided was sandstone. Gets approval, yet something like the South Downtown Waterfront Plan has not seen the implementation. That contradiction speaks volumes. So there was a couple of comments around that, around sort of leading by example, making sure the walk matches the talk. Trying to just summarize them. I think sort of collaboration sort of mentioned, or amongst the region jurisdictions, that could be something that the city spearheads. We're fortunate enough to have councillors from a couple other jurisdictions in our group as well. So there's some good discussion there. And just trying to think, I'm not sure that I used the right notes from the breakout room. So now mine's like the ones I put up are with a bunch of other ones. And I think there was this idea around the city sort of creating platforms in which, whether it's evaluation of businesses or things like that, to start to identify and provide some public input, public information around businesses that are living by these principles or doing their best to live by them and put them into practice. And then also just discussions around, creating forums for education on the donut model, what that might look like, and how is that, what is the city doing to sort of promote that dialogue and create those forums? I might have missed a few things, but I'm trying to go quick. Thanks.
Thanks, Tyler. No, it was a lovely discussion with everyone, and it was wonderful to see everybody out today. So thank you for your time. And just a reminder, next week, there's another presentation, Climate Action and Care for the Environment, which is, Heather, what day is that on?
That is Tuesday, May 10th.
Tuesday, May 10th at 7 o'clock. And then also the following week, or 2 weeks at the end, May 27th, we're having an in-person social where we can all get together and share some food and drink at a location to be announced, but somewhere sort of in the downtown area where we can, see each other in the flesh and discuss some more ideas and connect. Heather, was there anything else that you'd like to add that before we wrap up?
I just put it in the chat just to say thank you so much for our three panelists, as well as everybody who took the time this evening to join us for this really important discussion. And I'll hopefully see lots of you next week.
And a big thank you to Heather and all the others that helped organize this. Thank you so much. And I think it's appropriate to say, may the 4th be with you all.